And we are live. Uh, Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm hoping that you just had the chance and the privilege, and I do mean that, of watching Fire by Julia Blauvelt premiere as our final production of our inaugural season. Um, we're going to be talking about that, obviously, tonight. If you haven't had the chance to watch it, but will at some future date, God, do so. Do yourself a favor. It was such a treat, such a joy on every personal level for me as a theater goer or a watcher of entertainment. It's absolutely a home run. I really think we closed the season out on a high note. I just want to give our wonderful tech director and technical goddess, actually, Adriana Gaviria, a chance to introduce herself and all the players that we'll be talking to tonight.
Thank you, Jack. Yes, this is very exciting because we're doing a speakeasy for F.I.R.E. for the last show of New Normal Reps 2021 season. A little bit about how tonight is going to go. We're going to get to know all about the play and this amazing creative team, but know that there is an opportunity for you to engage on both Facebook Live and also on YouTube. So if you have any questions or if there's any comments that you want us to see, feel free to put them in. There'll be an opportunity a little bit later on where we're also going to be putting the questions forth if anyone wants to answer on here. So know that that is coming. And then Jack, I'm going to pass it on back to you so we can get to know everybody.
Yes, well, we first of all, the whole cast is tremendous, and unfortunately, not all of them are able to join us as of yet. Some of it, we may have some surprises pop in along the way, but let me talk about the people who are here. First of all, we start with the cast as Aaron Madison, who played Hutch, who is unforgettable and inimitable. We see Ella Dershowitz playing Penny, who is trying to think of. I'll use indelible again because it's a good word, and I think also true. We have Jeffrey Bean, a founding member of NNR, who blew us away in his performance in Lines in the Dust, and playing the opposite of that here in Fire, but blowing us away nonetheless. We have our amazingly gifted and smart and patient director, Heather Arnson. And we have the person who made it all possible, the playwright, my friend, and future star writer, Julia Blauvelt. And I am Jackie Anfor. I'm the artistic director of New Normal Rep. It was my real privilege and honor when we were discussing our first season of 4 plays to submit Julia's play. Julia and I have known each other a while, and we'll talk about that, no doubt, at some point. But I had seen a reading of this a couple of years ago, and one always goes to readings for friends with a certain amount of trepidation / hope. But I didn't with Julia's because I knew Julia was an excellent writer, and I've always known that. And it was just maybe the best reading I'd ever seen of a play. And so ever since then, that play has stuck in my head. And this is before she went to and graduated with distinction from NYU's playwriting program. She wrote this beforehand, and so I was just so excited to be able to introduce Julia's work to not only the rest of the NNR board, but to the audience as well. So I guess I'm supposed to ask some questions and facilitate some discussions. So I guess we'll start with you, Julia. First of all, what inspired you? These are very vague and not very interesting questions. But what inspired you to commit yourself to playwriting, and what were the circumstances that made you write Fire?
I think that's a great question, actually, Jack.
And
I think don't be humble. Great question, and I think you're gonna get some insight into how this happened through both of those answers, which is like observation. The playwriting came about because I'm obsessed with watching people and the psychology of what makes them tick. That makes me sound really creepy. I'm not, I hope, but I consider myself an observer. And I think I felt like I had more of an opportunity to do that in playwriting than other forms of artistic expression that I had tried. And I felt really like, this is where I can say something. This is where I can articulate what I see and how I experience things and how I move through the world. And it might be interesting to other people. I don't know. Let's write it down. And so F.I.R.E came about through one of those experiences of moving through the world in a very specific environment, which was a finance office. I was a temp. I knew nothing. I was an actor at the time. I came in into this world and I met these bros that maybe some of you have seen tonight or you will see later. And I was just absolutely riveted that this little microculture of financially responsible 28-year-olds existed, because I had no context for that. I was just kind of a freewheeling artist before that. And here were these people who really nickeled and dimed themselves into a better quality of life, or what they thought was a better quality of life down the line. And I thought that speaks to something we can all understand, no matter what career we have or what we're passionate about, just like this idea of survival and what future we want for ourselves. So that's a long-winded way of saying that I love to observe. I love to write down what I see and how people act. And that's sort of why I'm a writer. And that's definitely where F.I.R.E comes from.
Right. Great answer to a great question. Have you always known that you were funny?
I don't consider myself, I think I'm always trying to be very serious. And I wish that I was. Ella knows I did a solo show years back that was meant to be so serious and dark and angsty. And everyone was like, what a great comedy that was. and I think it was around that time I started to think, okay, maybe I am funny, whether I want to be or not. This is the hand I've been dealt. So yeah, that was the learning curve.
All right, that's wonderful. And we'll get back to you plenty, Julia. I promise, Julia and Julia's mom. I want to ask Heather. Heather and I met a few years ago during a production of a play of mine. She was the assistant director and was just so great. And she was kind enough to do one of our readings for NNR this summer of a play of mine called Battlefield Grounds, and she was just so terrific at it. And I approached her and asked her, would you be interested in reading the script, and what do you think about doing it? And she got back to me within, feels like minutes, but that's not mathematically possible, but she got back to me very quickly and said, oh my goodness, yes. Although I'm cleaning up her language. And Heather, can you talk to us about what made you want to direct this?
Yeah, for sure. And you definitely were cleaning up my language. It jumped off the page, right? The intricacies of the relationships and of the characters themselves were so very unique in who they were that I was like, yes, please let me tell this story. I was very excited about what I read, and my initial thoughts just kept coming. And Jack, I think I probably reached out to you even in the middle of it because it was so vibrant of a story. And I'm really interested in that part. I'm also, much like what Julie said, I'm very much an observer and have pretty much always been, and was also very quiet as a child and in my early adulthood. So finding a place where I could also be able to share my point of view as a storyteller is where I'm at now and how I'm here. But the voice part for me, still, like, I love to be able to blend that with a writer that I totally am in love with their work, which I am, of Julia's. And Julia's so gracious that we were able to also collaborate and do some development here on a work that she had already pretty much had wrapped it up, but was so open to hear different thoughts about how to kind of just sculpt here and there to really like bring things out and sing in a new way. So also, I very much appreciate that collaboration.
Well, let me ask you both about that, because that's always a leap of faith, right? Meeting the director or meeting the playwright. even having read the play or heard of seen the director's direction in the past. It's always a leap of faith, and some of it comes down to not only a shared vision for what the play's about, but just a chemistry thing. What was that? How soon did you both know, or are you still undecided about whether you thought the collaboration was really going to click?
Heather, I don't want to be weird, but I knew it was instant. I was like, she's perfect when we started talking, and when I sussed out who you are and what you wanted to do with it, I was just like, wow, fates have brought us together. So what did you think?
I mean, I'm not going to be like creepy either, but it really was that first conversation, those first moments where like we just really clicked and our energy was like kind of simpatico from the beginning. And I think it's because we were both really want to and love to collaborate in a generous way. And I think that came across, and I'm glad you felt the same way. And we just launched from there. And Jack, you're right. It is about a leap of faith, and it is about trust. And I think that's something that as artists we have to do over and over again, even when sometimes we get burned, right? Like this isn't that case, but we have to, or else like you have to keep your heart and everything open in order to be able to create. So I think in that way, I think Julie and I like really like just like bonded right away over, which allowed us to have other conversations.
Right, and that just deepened and broadened the experience. And I just want to say to the audience, I was saying this to the group earlier, that as a writer, there are plays that I will read or watch and I'll really admire and enjoy. And then there are plays that I'll go to or read and think, God, I really wish I had written that. And there's that feeling of sort of this, I'm sure the Germans have a word for it, of a sort of joyful envy. It was just such a no-brainer for me that this place is so wonderful. So I want to ask the actors, the three actors we have here, how did you feel about reading the play? Because I got to say, I don't think it's a story that's ever really that I've ever heard before on stage, right? And so let's just go. Let's start with Jeffrey. What did you think of the play at first, and what drew you to playing Chris?
First of all, I just had a moment where I realized this is what it feels like to be on Hollywood Squares. You're sort of sitting up there waiting for your. I'll take Bruce Valanche for the block.
Circle gets the square.
Yeah. Anyway, well, I read this play when you submitted it to the reading committee, because I was on the reading committee, and for me, I guess, from an actor's perspective, when I read a play, you go into it with no prejudgments or anything, especially if you don't know anything about it. And the tells are if you get through the play and the dialogue never feels unnatural to you, that's a big tell that it's a good play, because that rarely happens. And then if on top of that there's moments where you go, ugh, or something hits you, then you're at that point you're pretty much on board with the whole thing. And that was certainly the case the way it was with Julia, and I think everybody on the committee pretty much unanimously felt that way. I mean, I don't even remember there being sort of any debate about it. It was just like, yeah, this is.
No, it was a given. And I didn't absent I'm on the reading committee too, so I certainly didn't absent myself or recuse myself from the decision. But I was very tight-lipped about it because Julia is a friend of mine. So I said, well,
right.
And I thought the play will do the talking for me. And I think that's really what happened. I mean, I think you're right, Jeffrey. Everyone was like, well, this is it. We want to do this. What about you, Ella?
Oh man, I literally just started jotting down answers because I don't have a brain that isn't a notepad. I've been friends with Julia for a really long time at this point, and so I had sort of heard about this part of her life. And also, I've just always thought that she was the coolest person ever and wanted an excuse to kind of get to be her and say her words and play like her foil. And so I read this and I was just like, oh God, I want to be cool enough to say these lines convincingly one day. Like, I want to be this person. And so that was just like my personal geeky reason. And also just what everyone else is saying about like the characters and the lines jumping off the page and being hilarious and also really poignant. And then on a totally different note, I've always hated this idea that like, if you can do anything else, don't act, don't work in theater, don't exist in this world. And I feel like this play is just like a really interesting way of grappling with that, where you've got this character that I play who obviously can do other things, and yet she is trying to figure out whether she wants to do those things or not. And that's just something that's always sort of meant a lot to me as a question. And so I really liked the way that you got into that.
Well, Marie Blauvelt just said you nailed the character, Ella. So,
well, that's really, that's what it's all for.
If we had a virtual marquee, that would be the first line.
I screenshotted that.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah.
Good, excellent. So, Aaron, let's talk to you for a second. You obviously have sort of been with the play as it's developed. First of all, before we get into your approach to the characters, I think is wonderful. I'm curious, as someone who had sort of a unique insight into seeing it be developed, what did you notice along the way?
Yeah, it was so fun to see it sort of grow over the different drafts and see it. The core like mystery at the heart of F.I.R.E is right. Who's doing this? Who is responsible for this hidden malice in the heart of this sort of otherwise seemingly regular office, right? And I won't give it away for anyone who's watching who hasn't caught it yet, but who was responsible for it and what it said about the entire office and people in it sort of shifted over the course of the different drafts. And I would get very, very attached to one ending. And the way that another draft, a subsequent draft is good is when you're so attached and then you read the other one and you're mad for a second, but then you're like, no, it's better. It's better this way. It has to be this way. Right. So it was fun to go on that roller coaster, and also to just see at when you're drafting and not being really a writer. It's something that I look on with awe at, where you have sometimes in early drafts characters that sort of dominate the entire scene, sometimes the play, and seeing the characters that didn't dominate develop into characters with pathos and arcs, and so that it's truly an ensemble was like a huge treat. And seeing them reflect the different portions of this office that at first to me, as a guy who like ran from 9 to 5s throughout his entire 20s, seems very alien. But you get to know these people and you're like, no, they have the same little moments of shame and like secret nobility and like, all those weird human qualms. So yeah, it was a real treat to see it develop. Yeah.
And just along those lines, it's to come out of the gate as Julia kind of did with this, and have to develop an ensemble piece where each character is layered and really fleshed out. Mm-hmm. I don't want to make you feel bad for spending all that money at NYU. I'm sure you got a lot out of it, but I would argue that's something you really can't teach. It's like dialogue. I would think that you either have a gift for it, and you can sharpen it, you can hone it, you can improve it, but I remember Julia and I have been friends for years too, and I knew her when she was primarily an actress, and she showed me a couple of things she was writing, and I was, I think, almost annoying about saying, no, Julia, you really got to write. You're a really good actress, but you really need to write. And you were resistant about that, I think, at first, right? And it turns out I was cool. And so that's the big lesson. But getting back to Aaron, but like, talk to me about Hutch. Such a fascinating character, as I was saying before we got online. In the wrong hands, you could really dislike him, right? You could really become an irritant, as a lot of the characters in the play find him to be, and yet they all sort of like him. So what was your secret? And I think that also, having worked a little bit with Aaron before, is that he's just got, and knowing him personally, he does have sort of a natural affability. And God knows what dark things that masks, but
exactly. Well practiced.
How did you approach Hutch? Because obviously, it really worked. We really liked you from the beginning, and Julia wrote you into corners in which it wouldn't have been easy to like you.
I thank you, and I thank Julia for the just sheer wall of incorrigibility that Hutch is. He's one of those guys who you're right. You should want to punch him in the face, and you probably like do. He's just capitalism's biggest fanboy, but somehow I think it's the purity of it, you know. And I've experienced this. You know, I'll watch somebody who has a hobby or an interest or just an obsession that's different from mine, and the first instinct is like, ugh, like that's weird or that sucks. But then you see how pure the love is. You see how much Warren Buffett means to this guy, how much savings means to this guy, how it's like an ethos. And there's something about that purity that, like, even if I don't agree with the ends of it or it's not how I would structure my life, it's like amazing, and it's a beautiful expression of the human spirit, even if it is about like Roth IRAs. So finding the joy there was a treat for me, and hopefully that's what came across.
Ted Hornick is right. Aaron is just that magnetic. You can't not like him.
Thank you, Ted.
Assuming Ted Hornick is one of the felons you keep in touch with through a letter writing campaign. But I mean, you know, you bring up a really interesting point, because Hutch really, in many ways, embodies. My dogs are debating the play. That's how good it was. Hutch embodies, like, the most, for me, and I think for a lot of the audience goers, the most unpleasant ethos. But there's such a genuine, there's such an ingenuousness about it, such an enthusiasm for it, that it's easy to discard that. It's easy to see that he's not deliberately being, I mean, he is rapacious, but he's not trying to do so at the cost of someone else. You know, he wants everyone to be on board, which, you know, a lot of economic theorists will tell you is impossible, but he's not going that. He's not worrying about that.
Yeah, I think you're right that there is as selfish as he can be and as self-centered and oblivious as he can be. I think he thinks of himself as a philanthropist, as a guy who's sharing his wisdom. In rehearsal, Heather, you would often say, "Remember, he's always about to give a TED Talk or in the middle of a TED Talk. That's like something that he's always on the verge of the TED Talk, or here's the TED Talk." And so that spirit of sharing is, like, I do think that's a big part of him that can be super annoying, but also at a certain point you just got to give it to him, you know.
Yeah, and I love what Julia does with the script too, is that you do start thinking, who is this guy and what could have manufactured him in his psyche? And she waits till just about the very end, but she explains it in a very simple way. And then, for me anyway, it's like, oh, that makes so much sense. That this is a natural, lovable man's way of improving himself, and as far as he's concerned, the world around him. Like, he's evangelical, but not in a bad way about it.
Yes, finding that stability in the face of something that was out of his control. You know, very, very human, even if he's dealt with it in a really exuberant way. Yeah.
Heather, my dog wants to know, how would you have directed it differently? How would you have directed it differently, you think, if it were an onstage performance?
It was an onstage piece. I mean, in the physical space, it would be great to have some of those overlapping scenes take place in the same actual space together, so that we could see the dynamics of how the ensemble functions, even when they're in parts of the ensemble. Because that's just going to a little riff on that is back to your earlier question about what drew me to the piece, and then I'll come back to this, is that it is an ensemble piece. That is at the core, and that in this time when we've all been so separated, that really showing and building the community of the piece was actually one of the more important parts of what spoke to me about the story, is that they don't exist without each other. Like, they are so intertwined in the way the story is told, and that was important to me to reflect on in this medium as well. And to bring it back to the stage, yeah, I mean, listen, the most different isn't actually the way those words work together, but would be to be able to play with designers in the medium in which they're designed to be played with, right? Like to be able to have like the lighting designer come in and like really focus those moments, to be able to, you know, have like David come in and design for the piece and play with color story and who's wearing what and when and how those things come together in textures and stuff that we can't quite that's not quite tangible in this medium. So mostly it's that part. And obviously we would be on our feet, so that would be super fun to be able to move about in space together. But it's the other elements and other people that kind of can't play as fully in this space as we've been able to as actors, directors, and writers.
Yeah, and let's take a moment here to give a shout out to one of the things I think was so impressive was all the technical aspects, from the design
Totally.
to the original music. I just think it was all working towards one endpoint, which is both a tribute to their talents, but also to your articulation of what you wanted in the end. And so I think they deserve special merit because I think it really enhances the piece in every possible level. But your point about ensembles is so salient, especially in this COVID, almost pre again COVID world in which we're living. It's an ensemble piece, as we keep saying. What's it like? I mean, Jericho, which was our first play, was an ensemble piece, kind of, but all the characters appeared together in only one scene. It was mostly 2-on-2. This is a scene where for almost the whole play, everyone's in the room together.
Yeah.
How do the actors? How did you deal with that? So different, right? Well, maybe one of you or all of you could explain just the technical and emotional challenges that brought about.
I will say a testament to Heather is after the first day of rehearsal, I got home and I was like, oh, shoot, why didn't I go out for drinks with the cast afterwards? And I was literally like, oh, because we were in different places in different states.
Right.
Like from day one, it
That
really
hasn't stopped
felt
you before.
ensemble, and I forgot we hadn't been rehearsing in the same room.
Right.
So that was huge. But also, I think the actual shooting it was hard because we couldn't see each other. But then watching it tonight, it was just like, I don't know, the hat scene, which, not to give away too much, that was just really fun to see because I felt crazy shooting it. But I think you really, because Heather, you were actually watching and you knew what we were all doing in relation to each other. I think we just had to really trust you that you would tell us if we individually looked crazy or if we looked like we were all existing in the same world. And then you could actually put us into that same world with technical elements, which was really fun to see all come together.
Thank you for that trust, because that is pretty key. I felt like I felt similarly. I felt like we were all in the room together, all very much connected all the way through the process. Shooting aside, because it was very discombobulated for everybody, but having that trust and knowing that you and everybody else, right, are just gonna like focus on the parts that you bring to the ensemble, and that's why it all kind of works together. So I thank you for that.
Yeah.
I do think one thing that helped with this particular play is that everybody's in cubicles in reality. So you kind of had your task within your cubicle, and you could focus on that, and that gave you something to do, and then it was really, as it would be in a cubicle, if you're typing something, you're listening to your coworkers, and this process is all about listening because you have no visual feedback to respond to because you're just looking at a little light on a black box,
Yeah.
So I think having those things within this particular play sort of work to our advantage in this medium,
Yeah, and it's a new medium that we're still discovering, and I think there are clear drawbacks to it, but I think there are some advantages to it. And I think that actors and directors like Heather are getting savvier about it at an almost exponential rate as we explore this. And one of the things that I've been saying from the start that I noticed is that I think this privileges text in a way that other forms don't. I mean, theater does certainly, but certainly more than television or movies, but it really forces you, I guess, as actors to listen, and it forces the audience members to listen. Did you guys find that to be true?
think it's one of the reasons that I really love this medium and exploring it to its fullest is because it prioritizes text. And for me, text is everything. Like, we have literally nothing to play with if Julie didn't write it or Jack, if you didn't write it in shows that we've done. Like, there's nothing. I'll just be in a room with people and be like, hey, how's it going? Like, so the fact that this is a medium that actually puts that forth and makes it front and center is something that really drives me to make sure that what we're doing visually lifts it up as much as it possibly can.
A lot of the visual stuff in television and film is so tempting that it draws all the attention when you're working in television and film as opposed to the text. And what's great about this medium is that you get the reach that you have with television and film because it's electronic. But the net that we're playing tennis with puts all the focus on the text because it can't be on the visuals. So I think that's kind of exciting that for the first time the theater has the ability to have the same reach that film and television has. We have the potential to have that without losing the fact that in the theater, the people who are sitting out in the seats are called the audience, and they're called the audience because they listen. They listen to the text. It's all about that. If it was about the visuals, they'd be called spectators. They're not. We call them audience because it's about hearing the play. And we have the reach now, and yet we haven't lost the fact that the focus of theater is always on hearing the play.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. That's a wonderful point. Marie Blauvelt says the isolating on each other's face within so-called cubicles allowed us to see so much subtle expression. Excellent point, Jeffrey. So
finally got some love from Mom.
Yeah. That is true. I mean, I was talking to someone the other day who had watched a lot of Zoom stuff, and this isn't Zoom, but watched a lot of online theater, and it upset them because, for various reasons. And I said, well, you may be looking at it the wrong way. If you go in expecting it to be a play in a playhouse, you're going to not be happy because it's not really what it is. It's a new thing. Mm-hmm. And if you can embrace what it gives you and let go of what it doesn't, I think it has its own rewards. And no one is more anxious to get back to doing theater in theaters than I am. But I think that this has I think done right, it has a real staying power and a real uniqueness to it. That I had nothing to do with the production of this other than saying, yes, do it. But just I think you guys really nailed that. I mean, to an extent that I've seldom, if ever, seen before. And let me ask you this, and this is open to everyone, but especially, I guess, to Julie and Heather, but really to everyone, were there preconceptions you went into about how to do this play that changed pretty radically along the way, or was it more or less as you expected?
I started grad school right when the pandemic hit, right? So, I mean, pretty much I got into this group of theater makers, and immediately we were all like, okay, the industry is going to be different now, probably forever, certainly for now. And I, spent 2 years thinking about and listening to people offer theories and theses about how we were going to make theater going forward. And at first, people were really nervous. I was really nervous. I think we didn't know what we were working with. We were like, but the point is liveness. The point is like bodies in the room. And I gradually saw the conversation change to, okay, but it isn't theater, and it isn't TV, and it isn't film. It's something else entirely. And like you said, it has its own merits. And I think I went into this, I think specifically I was like, okay, I've written a huge cast. Sorry, they're all going to have to, I wonder how we're going to find these moments of stillness or, two people, how those are going to work. And I was blown away by the ability of this production to still have those moments of isolation and make this chaotic environment get really small for scenes and beats. And that is something that I feel like theater does, and that's what this theater did too. So yes, I didn't know kind of how we were going to get, you know, some of the things I love about live theater implemented, but you found them, and we found a way to do it, and it was really cool.
I think it really does lend itself to intimacy because the actors are looking right at you, and so there's no sort of escaping or reaching for your, you know, cough drop or reading your program. And I guess there is, no one's watching it, but the actor's face is compelling, and depending on what medium you watch it in, if you're watching it on your laptop, and I feel that most people probably aren't, but a lot of people are. I mean, you're really physically right next to the actor, and that does something psychologically, I think, that lends itself to intimacy. Yeah. Let me. Did you want to say something, Heather?
Yeah, just to riff on that, as far as the, you know, direct to camera was a definite choice here, so that we can, as humans, connect with someone else, right? Like right now, I know I see myself looking down because I'm not looking right at my green thing, but so I know it's a hard task that I ask people to do, which is to act with a green glowing dot as opposed to the people that they're actually in the scenes with. But it's super, super important to me because we only have the 1 point POV, right? There's only this one camera that we have. So it's the only way in. And by nature, we connect with people through their eyes because that's what's telling us what's going on. Even if there are other things even going on in the body that will betray or belie what's happening with the eyes. So that was like very important that we capture that because it's the only way that we really can feel what's going on in this medium specifically. You know, Jack, you asked like how it would be different on stage. So many other things than what I said about designers that also build community. Like there's some great moments where we could actually get like Jazz and Noel in other formations that I think would support like who they are with each other, and that Hutch would want to be involved in, but would definitely not be invited to. Like so those things, but it was really important to see what we could do here in this medium to express how much Hutch wanted to be a part of them, and they're like only this much, but again, like right into camera, just so we could attach to them and feel all the things that they were feeling.
That's a great point. Speaking of which, and this is again part Heather's credit and part Julia's credit. You know, you do such a wonderful job, Julia, instinctively of establishing this sort of larger than life Cruella de Vil character in Danica, and I think you mention her just enough to have her and to be this off stage, if you will, off screen presence, and then you bring her in key moments, but just long enough for us to never really get to know her, and then she's gone. And I think the balance is perfect. How did you arrive at that balance? Was it sort of instinctive and organic to you, or did you have to add more, cut a little more as you went along?
Well, I think no one wants to watch a whole play about Danica. I think it would be exhausting. I think she doesn't want to do it. I don't think she'd sit still long enough to have a play written about her. So to my mind, you could say it is instinctive. I think, you know, I like to treat my characters as people. I let them on when they want to be there. I get them off when they're done. And I just think that's how people like Danica are, you know. So I let her decide her own entrances and exits. And I just wrote down what I felt like she would have time for. And she really is the one who operates most within the constraints of the office and where they are and what time of day it is, because she's the one keeping tabs and being held to account for ultimately to the other lurking presence we don't see, which is the man at the top of the food chain. So she is really, I thought, I'm glad you say it was just the right amount, because I do miss her a lot when she's not there. But I also think that's kind of great, because that's my intention with that character. Is I don't think she's a villain. She does some upsetting things, obviously, and she doesn't have maybe the best way with people, but I love her. and I understand her.
And you
I know
even
that
give her a
she-
wonderful moment too about talking about her father, and
Yeah.
that's what I mean is that she is, in the hands of a lesser writer, she would be absolutely just a villain and just a sort of ogre, and you retain enough of that to make it fun and to give the other characters something to fear, outside, which I think is essential. But you really humanize her too in those small little ways, which I think, again, lesser writers wouldn't think to do or be able to pull off. And that scene about where she's coming up with the equations and her father's relentless with her, you really get a sense for each of them, why they are how they are, and they're not, and you don't hit them over the head with it. I mean, the audience over the head with it. You just, if you're present and you're paying attention and you have a modicum of empathy, because that's all I've got, you understand why these people are or how they are. And, so now I'm going to lead you a potentially litigious question. You worked in this office or a office like this. To what degree were these characters, and you don't have to name real names, in fact, I would advise you as your counsel not to, but to what degree are any of these characters based on real people? Are they amalgams? Are they imagination? Are they real people? Or are they sort of an admixture?
Well, let me just say, for all the lawyers in the room, this is a work of fiction, pure and simple. Let's just get that out of the way first.
Any resemblance is coincidental. Yeah,
absolutely. Any resemblance is completely on you.
Right.
But these people, they're real in the sense, I think that any person you write, and Jack, you probably feel this way too. Your characters are people you've known, some more directly than others. The Fire Bros are real, but they absolutely became sort of a melting pot of also me being like, what is this code they live by? And then staying up all night on the Fire Reddit thread. And so their voices are infused with this whole community.
There is such a thing. Wow, that's amazing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dear Lord. Yeah.
And I think that's true. That's what I'd say for these characters is they were my entry points into these people who are fictional. But I think the inspiration gets sparked by meeting someone who sets off something in you that's like, what? How did that person come to be the way they are? And so, yeah, I just think, write who you know also, but then let your imagination kind of decide where they go.
That's fascinating. Well, there's a lot I don't know, but I mean, I never even knew that subculture really existed, and I can't think of any adjacent culture that a play has ever really tackled. I mean, there's like Glengarry Glen Ross. There's those sorts of things, but there are if you want to go to movies, The Boiler Room, but they're painted is very. I mean, they're painted with very broad strokes. I'm not denigrating the writing. I'm just saying you humanize these people and find humor in these people. That, like, Glengarry Glen Ross is often an extremely funny play, but it's always a cruelty. It's always at someone's expense, and the cruelty comes from a bunch of guys trying to assert who's the alpha man. And while there's an element of this in the play, it's so deftly handled and so handled in a three-dimensional way that I feel it's a much fuller rendering of people that way. So I don't think anything like this cohort has ever been tackled with that sort of sensitivity and just exploring them as people rather than trying to be polemical about it.
That's cool. And it's also, I think you've touched on something important, another major difference between this and Glengarry Glen Ross. If that play is all about people vying to be the alpha, this in a way is all about people vying to be the beta. They just want to fly under the radar. And I think that is maybe the thing we don't see that often, because it's a totally legitimate motive, but it just doesn't get written about as much. But like, I think it's so endearing.
Yeah, most of us are like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a wonderful insight. Now you had it done as a reading. couple of years ago. And obviously you found out something about it there. Now, working with Heather in this cast, what do you know about this play or think about this play now that you didn't beforehand?
Heather, cast, I think you slowed it down in a way that was not something I ever would have thought to do myself, because I don't know that I'm a writer yet who fully trusts my words. I think I wrote this as a really chaotic, like, office comedy, the people tripping over desks. Like, that was the image I had when I put the words on the page. And part of me is just thinking, like, that's a bit of a Hail Mary, like, hopefully everybody will be distracted by all the antics that are going on. But I think this production has really taught me to trust the words, and that the words are actually worth listening to. And I don't think I heard it the same way. I don't think I heard it the way I have ever. Now that I've had this production, I hear it totally differently. So yeah, big part.
So, in other words, you've learned a lot about yourself as a writer too, not just the play.
Yes, myself as a writer, where I lean, where I shy away. I think what the beauty of seeing it sort of in this medium, Jeffrey was saying, or someone was saying something about intimacy, and like it's intimate for the writer too. You really like up close and personal with all of the shit you put on the page, and you've just, there's no rows of people around you. It's just you in your living room listening to it, and that has been so good for me on so many levels.
And yeah, trust your words. Really, like, they're gorgeous. Like, the way you put phrases together, and also just to backtrack to the very first question, the format in which you write, the way the text actually physically looks on the page is one of the first things that pulled me in, because it told me so much about you.
Yeah.
So much about you. And I was like, yes, what is this going to say? Because and I know people who are listening may not have seen the text, but it's not written in like standardized, final draft, the period goes here, a shift or whatever. You can't save the page. Like, none of that thing that happens here. It's very much an organic way of writing, and speaks to me now, but spoke to me then about who you are, and made me want to read further. And then I was like, oh my God, yes, please.
Right. I mean, like the dialogue, just if people haven't seen it,
Thank you.
The way most people, including me, write it in the boring way, which is write character name, and then you write the dialogue. Julia will do that, but then like the dialogue will intersperse me at various places on the page. Which I think Shakespeare did some of too. So there's Shakespeare and Julia, and but I mean, it does tell you that it's idiosyncratic in a good way. It's idiosyncratic without it having to try to be. It's just the way she naturally writes. And I remember the first few things she handed to me to read. This is years ago when I was trying to beg her to really focus on writing. And by the way, she's a very good actress, but in fact, the first time I think I said that, she's like, "You don't think I'm a good actor?" And I'm like, "No, you're wonderful." But dialogue, I don't think you can teach. I think you have to have an ear. I mean, maybe that's not true, but that's my always been belief is that you have an ear for it and a gift for it, or you don't. And right from the very start, Julia just had her own voice, and it was just magical. Almost as magical as Carol Todd, who's just come in.
Yay!
Sorry, I'm so late. We went up about 15 minutes late on stage tonight, so I just finished.
Carol is in such high demand. She opened 2 plays tonight. This one, and then a play in IRL, as I believe the kids call it. And how did that go, Carol?
It went well. Yeah, it's of course, and the whole thing in tears, so I'm a little bit still recovering. I apologize.
Right. No.
Just sniffling a little.
Well, we were just talking a lot. I was asking Ella and Aaron and Jeffrey a lot about what about Julia's writing really grabbed you and stuck its hooks into you as an actor, and made you really want to play in this play. So maybe you could put your 2 cents into that.
I mean, I just love her ear for dialogue. I find her writing so unique. It's not, you recognize it right away.
Yeah.
Every one of us that read this play immediately got very excited about it. I love Danica. I love how crazy she is, and how there's all those long monologues. There's such meat and depth and like hidden pain underneath all that stuff for this woman, and it's just so masterfully written. You don't really have to work too hard at it.
Yeah, and I think that I agree. I think the word masterful is absolutely right. It's a master class in writing, and I want to get back to that in a bit. Although, again, we can't underscore how important Heather's shepherding of the actors and their own talents help make that come to life. But Adriana has some questions from the audience. So Adriana, why don't you read a few of the less salacious ones?
Sure. So one question that I have is from David Stern. This question is actually for Julia. And the question is, which character in the final production was most different from your mental image of them going in?
Great question, David Stern.
Classic Stern.
Classic Stern. And he's not here tonight. I wish he was so he could weigh in on this. We'll have to get his take on it later. But Nigel's interpretation of Noel was like a breath of fresh air to the way, he sort of went from, I like a love story, so I wanted one in here, and I wanted like a cool, brooding accountant dude who like didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. But Nigel's Noel like doubled down on that and like really owned it and was just like having a great time, sort of reveling in his apathy. And I never would have thought to write him that way, but it makes he is that way. And it was such a spark of like, that's a great decision and totally different from like the original, the little spark of an idea I had when I put that character on page.
That's amazing. That's a great name for a memoir, by the way. Reveling in his apathy.
Dibs. You can't take that. Because I said it. That's fine.
Adriana, do you have another one?
Yes. This question is from IRC, and they would love to know how it actually technically worked since you couldn't see each other.
Adriana, do you want to take that?
I'm like, it's a technical question.
Yeah, do you want to do it? You go for it. You tell us.
Yeah.
So even though everyone is in the same room, we are using a meeting collaboration tool. But in order to have that intimacy with you, the audience, the actors need to look into the camera. So when they're looking into the camera, they're not really being able to have that interaction with their fellow actors. So it is there's a challenge in that. And then there's also other instances where Heather, let's say she wanted to come up with some like really creative ideas, and you would have to shoot those scenes or those shots separately. So that's also very different than when you're on stage or when you're working on a play, because you are really, it really is a combination, right, of film and stage and all of that.
You have to learn to listen in a different way.
Yeah. I was going to say, going in, I was like, okay, we're shooting a movie. And that's like not quite right. It felt like it was like a radio play, acting in a radio play,
yes, it is.
where I could hear all of these voices of my fellow actors, but I'm here in the void, kind of. It was a really interesting challenge, but also as we've sort of covered, I don't know about you guys, but I also found it kind of inspiring at times to just sort of imagine and have that fill the area,
It was really interesting today watching, because we had not seen what our fellow actors were actually doing. But as Erin is saying, I'm realizing how much of it I had imagined based on your voices and based on the words, because it was totally different than what you were actually doing up there. And I was like, oh, I haven't actually seen this scene. But yeah, I think it was just everyone's voices were so evocative, and we had gotten to watch people play their characters on Zoom for like the first 3 days of rehearsal. And so I do feel like there was some filling in the blanks and some imagining, and it was kind of cool. It was less challenging than I expected, but still challenging.
Do we have any more questions?
Yes, we do. This one is from Mike Madison. So Mike loves how Chris and Hutch served as an inspirational foils for each other, and how it builds throughout the play. So Mike wanted to see if anyone had anything further to say about that relationship.
Yes, they are intergenerational foils for each other. That is maybe my favorite relationship in the play. And without giving too much away, that's, I think, what is also what makes it sad. And so I think it was important to have two people experiencing fire, because fire is such a millennial thing. When you look it up, when you go to the Reddit boards, like I told you to, you'll see that it's all millennials. And it's born out of this movement of the very specific time and place of like young people taking their future into their hands. And so it's important to have someone outside of that generation looking in on that and feeling left out, and feeling like, like, even though Hutch would never call himself entitled, he is sort of. It's a privilege to be able to save money. It's a privilege to be able to put it away and not have to spend it. And I think on some level, Chris gets that and exemplifies that. But Hutch and Chris, what do you guys think? How did you feel inside it?
I don't know. It occurs to me that, like, having graduated right around 2008, there was a lot of angst and like pissiness, and it was justified, about entering the workforce during this historic financial crash, right? And like, what is there left for us? And I think maybe that's part of the youth of Fire, is like, we got to look out for ourselves, and like, if we're going to get out of this rat race, we got to do it ourselves. But I think it does give short shrift, and I'm not sure how you feel about this from Chris's perspective, Jeffrey, that like, if you've been working your whole life and you're building something, you've got a family, you've got obligations, and that hits as you're preparing to get out, like the cries of unfair from young people who are just starting must seem kind of hollow. And I don't think that's something that Hutch internalizes at all. I think he's sort of out here fighting the good fight, and there's a different perspective.
Well, I played Chris. I mean, I saw Chris as Generation X because I am Gen X. So, and Gen X, our thing is that we're very small. There's not a lot of us, and we're bookended by the millennials and the baby boomers, which it just really sucks. And and so I totally got Chris's point of view on all of that. I had to say, I think that's the first time I've ever played a character I said that guy is of my generation, and so I had a lot of fuel for
it. Maybe one more question from the chat, if we have one to go, and I have one more for Julia, and then we'll say our goodbyes, because I know we need to wrap up fairly soon.
Yes, we have to do our toast in the next couple of minutes. We have a lot of love coming from Facebook and from YouTube. A lot of congratulations to the entire cast and creative team of F.I.R.E. And so, Jack, go ahead and ask your question away.
Well, I mean, on that, but piggybacking on that, I would urge everyone who saw this tonight and loved it, which I'm assuming if it were a Venn diagram, it would be a circle. I would urge everyone to please spread the word. I think word of mouth is how this stuff gets out, and this is a play that deserves to be seen and heard. Julia, you're a young playwright. It tells me but so what advice would you give to to writers, sort of just starting out?
I'm gonna go back to something Heather said about the page and how it looks on the page. And I really think the most important place you can start, and the best favor you can do yourself, is tear up your expectations and your obligations of what you think you have to write in and the format you think it has to look like. Get rid of Final Draft if you don't like it. Don't type in Microsoft Word if you don't like it. Get a notepad. Write wherever. Break up sentences where you want. Put periods wherever you want. Just like fucking write the thing you hear in your head. And the rest, I think, is secondary to that. Just like get your vision in the purest form, and then you can worry about everything else later.
That's great advice. Thank you. I wish you had been there to teach me that. So, all right. So, I would like to propose a toast to both New Normal Rep and its inaugural season, and to thank everyone and all the plays and all the productions, too many to name here, who have made this happen. And specifically to the cast of and crew and artistic collaborators of F.I.R.E, who have, I think, sent us off into the sunset of our first season in the most wonderfully entertaining, funny, and moving way. So, cheers to all of you.
Cheers.
Thank you all for coming.
And so, please spread the word. We're going to be doing all we can, because I think this, as we all agreed, this is a special play, directed magnificently and acted beautifully, and it's a mitzvah to get people to come see this play, said the Catholic boy from Long Island. So get them to see it. Thank you so much for participating, everyone, and thank you, Julia and Heather and Cash, for putting together such a marvelous production.
Thank you, Jack.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
We get a
everybody.
transcript of this chat. Bye.
Happy opening.
Happy opening.
Bye.
Bye.